he knew that he didn't want to suffer. And you have a dear friend that is facing an illness or a tough situation, and it's all too easy in this day and age.
Not everybody can have those conversations when whether they die suddenly and unexpectedly or that they get a terminal diagnosis. But he had this level of, maybe because he went through the first bout.
Other films on this subject, they have somebody in the ICU or they're completely bedridden and they're
actively dying.
Yeah, they're miserable. And he made it, his plan in essence was to be happy, to die, to spend whatever time he had to be happy.
Welcome to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. If you ever asked, how do I protect myself and those I love if something unexpected happened to me? You're in the right place. I'm your host, Niki Weiss, and together we'll explore how to protect yourself in a world where both your physical and digital legacy leave a lasting impact.
Well, we're here with Bradley Berman, and I'm so excited. Bradley, you and I met a few months ago when I was launching my final playbook, the system where we're just trying to get people to talk about the conversation around death and dying. And while I was researching, I found Jack Has a Plan. Seeing the previews and the trailer of Jack Has a Plan, it just realized that was the link for me. Wow. That was realizing that there are people out there that are thinking about this and putting together a plan. And what was it for you? Talk a little bit about Jack and your connection with him and the project.
Sure. Well, thanks a lot, Niki, for inviting me to the podcast. I knew Jack for 25 years. You know, I knew him for so long, and he was just a part of my life. It's not like, we had a long friendship that dates back like well before the start of this project. This is, a lot of times a documentary filmmaker will have to build rapport with a subject. But this was a personal story about my very close personal friend. So, those boundaries and barriers were not there. And from the very beginning, meeting him, I met him just a few months after his first surgery, right? It was still very fresh. This was 92 or so. I'm 90.
And he was how old?
He was in his early 30s, So,
and he got his first diagnosis.
Yeah, exactly. So he was in his early 30s, and he was just very, even at that moment. I mean, this is like the early 90s. He was very open and talking about it, and he would lead discussions with it. He saw it as his scars on the they opened up his brain, opened up his skull. He saw them as a badge of honor, right? And he was quite open about discussing what he had been through, and he did it with the same jovial, open spirit that you see throughout the whole film. And that was just part of who he was. Throughout all those decades, he would he would say that he had a lobotomy. That was his joke of how he would refer to having part of his brain. I mean, they removed the tumor. They tried to remove the tumor, not the brain cells. But he would say he had a lobotomy, and how that made him a better person because he had this lobotomy, right? So that was the kind of the gallows humor that he used, right? So then he went into remission, and he changed his lifestyle after his first bout with this brain tumor. We didn't know that it was. He was sort of suspected, but it was in the background for a long time, for more than a decade. And when it came back, he, in a big way, it was one. It's not really in the film, but it was one afternoon where he was washing the windows of his house, and he lost language for 3 or 4 minutes. He said, it just, your brain goes crazy. Like you can't even, how do you even formulate thoughts when you don't have words and language? And when he came out of it and he called his wife, he said he knew it was back in a big way. And even from then, he was already talking about wanting to share this story, like this amazing thing of being given 6 months to live, and then it's 20 years later, and what it was like to go through all that and live through, having this presence, this sense of mortality, this sense of diminished capacity, what it was like for that, and how he was going to chart the course going forward.
And to be able to do it in a digitized way. I mean, if that final diagnosis actually happened back in the 90s, he might not have been able, or you as a team might not have been able to document it as detailed as you had in the current version of Jack Has a Plan, which, by the way, let's go ahead and show the clip so people can really understand what we're talking about.
There's my best friend Jack begging me to make this documentary about his life.
Some people hate the way they sound, they hate the way they look.
No, it doesn't bother me.
Oh, by the way, he has a brain tumor.
Basically, the news that I got was that I was terminal. I had one doctor told me I'd be dead in 6 months. They cut, from the center of the head, and they went up around here, and they went in front of the ear.
A big chunk of my brain is gone.
The tumor has increased somewhat.
You want the whole thing on tape?
Yeah, completely.
Why? That's insane.
We all die at some point. It has to deal with knowing it's going to happen and how you live your life and how you try to accept that death is going to get you.
I just got home one day after work and he was like, I quit my job. I'm left with this. Could we have at least discussed it? My God.
You are choosing the day that you want to die. And that allows people to die with dignity.
I believe he is constructing some sort of delusion around the myth of Jack Teller.
Oh my God, that's the house. That's the house I grew up in. The deal with my mom is that she just wasn't here. She didn't really participate. I haven't talked to my mother in probably 25 years. Okay, I'm gonna recall that number and leave a message. Do you think I should do that?
He has my parents who love him deeply.
You left us behind. Empty heart, emptiness.
But he never had a real parent.
I never knew my biological father. I tried looking it up on my own. Oh my God.
Here's my boy.
Okay, was that too fast? Oh.
Are you still gonna do it?
Yes. I've had an incredibly happy life. I'm not just doing it because I'm scared of dying, quite the opposite.
Jack is creating his ultimate performance piece, which is leading up to his ultimate demise.
You gotta be scared, right?
Okay, I'm scared. You know, I'm here, my whole theory, gotta do it. I know I gotta do it, but man, when you really gotta do it.
I just want you around and I don't want you to do it.
So Bradley, based on the clip that we just saw, which
The trailer,
to me,
right.
my heart,
Yeah.
the trailer,
Yeah.
right? The trailer, would you have been able to do that back in the 90s? That level of quality, the cost of it, to be able to document?
I mean,
Jack's journey?
yes and no. I mean, there were technologies back then, like there were small cameras, and simple editing systems back then. But you're right. I mean, the technology's come a long way. There was a lot of the film that was shot on an iPhone and a very small camera that I just happened to have around. It wasn't like I geared up or anything. And it wasn't like I'm mostly a writer and mostly a content publisher and just sort of dabble in filmmaking. So, I just kind of picked up a small mirrorless camera and just started shooting with what I have. And we didn't know what was going to come from it. We didn't know what the idea of the project was. There wasn't an idea. There was not an idea. It was just
Really?
Yeah.
He wanted to document.
He just said, start shooting. And we would get together as friends, have a beer or sip of wine or something and just turn on the camera. I mean, that was the plan. The plan was no plan. It was just get together. And I love the opportunity because it, you get busy in your life and you have a dear friend that is facing an illness or a tough situation. And it's all too easy in this day and age, where we're all overly busy and overly programmed and scheduled to just say, I can't, I'm busy. I have work to do. And so the structure of of like saying, hey, like, let's shoot now, let's try, let's go there. And like, he would come up with ideas. Hey man, come see me over at my apartment, or let's go to this park, or let's go visit, a friend, or whatever it was, whatever idea he had. And I would say, sure, because we were working on this project. It gave it structure.
And the project for him was really just part of that legacy plan, right? It wasn't necessarily, hey, we're going to go to PBS and launch this. At the time that you were doing, you didn't have a plan for, let me rephrase, you didn't have a plan for the taping, but Jack had a plan for his demise. Like, he knew how he wanted to go out.
I think so. Very, very early on, he knew how, like, he knew that he didn't want to suffer. Okay. I mean, that's the critical thing. Like, some people in responding to the film, they say, well, it didn't look like he was suffering, because other films on this subject, they have somebody in the ICU or they're completely bedridden and they're
actively dying.
Yeah,
like,
they're miserable. And he made it, his plan in essence was to be happy, to die, to spend whatever time he had to be happy. That was the main idea, was that he wanted to not suffer, to experience, every day with as much capability. He didn't want to drift off, especially with someone who has a brain tumor. He didn't want to drift off into this world where he didn't recognize people, where he couldn't go to the bathroom by himself, where he had to have someone bathe him. That was just not him. He didn't want to suffer even a little bit. And I think that's the key thing. Everybody gets to choose.
And you just said it, right? Because that's the key, the keystone of the movie, right? Everyone gets to choose. And for some of, for those that are going to have the opportunity to watch the movie, not to give it away, but that choice was very personal for Jack, and not necessarily, he didn't take a vote in the people in his life. Like, well, what do you think?
Not at all. He had it set in his mind, and you're right. He didn't take a vote. That's an interesting way of saying it. Like, he would have conversations with people, and, with good, close friends, with me, with his wife even. And people would say, no, wait, delay, like, you're fine. And he knew it. He knew where the line was drawn. So that was the important thing. And it was, when we started the project, or when I was working on the editing, I thought, well, this is really a project about how all of us can come together and help our dear friend who's going through this hard time. And it really turned out to be the other way around. It was, he knew, he wasn't afraid of dying. He wasn't. I mean, of course, to some degree, but it was really much more a story about him helping everyone else around him, all of his loved ones, come to terms with it before, like, it's the whole idea of, like, preparing ahead of time, like, for mortality.
I've always said, as a thanatologist, the hardest thing about dying is watching someone you love die, because they have to continue on with life.
Yes.
And to me, that was the gift that Jack gave, that he allowed those he loved most to start that bereavement process before he left.
Exactly. You said it, that was in my mind, and you said it better than I could say it. And that helps people go through the bereavement, because it's like, I mean, there's anticipatory grief and all that, but people were fully prepared and they were aware. When you get blindsided, I think that's the hardest part of like just discovering that somebody died.
Now we have to just acknowledge, and I didn't, the only Jack I know is the
Yeah.
persona that's presented in the movie, but I would say that an extrovert, very open guy, right? An open book. Obviously a level of privacy he was happy to share, like that it was not a super private person, although I was respectful that those very last breaths were not caught on video, so that was also important. But at the same time, not everybody can have those conversations when whether they die suddenly and unexpectedly, or that they get a terminal diagnosis, because we're all going to die, right? Everyone dies. But he had this level of, maybe because he went through the first bout, and then 20 years later, it's like, oh, it's back. Now I have to face it.
I mean, there's that he was. You're
So
right. He was
legal-
experienced at. He was
yeah.
very well experienced in this whole subject of his own mortality. But you touched upon it very quickly. But I will wholeheartely agree. He was an extrovert. He was always the life of the party. He made everybody laugh. I mean, he was a performer and a musician, a storyteller, a producer. He just had that magnetic personality and an openness, right? He was just so open and willing to talk about anything. And and the fact that, he was facing his demise, it's created an extraordinary opportunity to discuss those issues with somebody going through it in a very cogent, funny, dynamic way. And, I didn't know, we started talking to each other on the phone, and this is in the film, like where it was just FaceTime conversations, and we started recording them. So there was something, obviously when we were together, it was fun and we would have a good time, but it just, I couldn't go over there every day all the time. So we would just pick up the phone like you do with a friend, right? And we recorded those conversations. And there's just something about the intimacy and the honesty, partly because we weren't making a film. We were just going through these things and recording them. And then by the end of it, we had all the material for a film.
That's amazing. So to me, starting to capture people's diet from diet. Let me take a step back as a recap. What's interesting is the social media phenomena that's happening right now is that if you go on the different platforms, TikTok, Insta, Facebook, people are starting to digitally document from diagnosis to death. It's fascinating. And the level of followers that people are intrigued, both from a heart sent, giving out their heartfelt feelings to the family that's going through it. But like Jack, these people are compelled to be like, my voice matters, what I'm going through, I want to share with you. And for some of the experiencers that I'm watching, it's just amazing that days before their last breath, they are trying to get on TikTok and create
that's crazy
a
in
message.
A way. It's mind-boggling. I mean, let me say that even we didn't know that this would eventually be a film, but how does a documentary usually work? You shoot for weeks, months, years, and you compile all this footage, and then you start to piece together a story, and you don't have it until well after the last shot has been shot. And I knew at a certain point that that Jack wouldn't see whatever, if I followed that program, then he wouldn't see what we were doing come to light or shared with anyone. So we did create this little YouTube series, since you were asking about social media, and we called it A Few Minutes with Jack. And it was just silly. Like I'd go shoot on a certain day and come back, and then over the course of as fast as possible, like in 2 or 3 days, cut together a 3 or 4, 5 minute reel of whatever we did together, and we would put it on YouTube. And we did like, I don't know, 15 or 20 episodes. I think we got to 100 viewers, so 100 subscribers. But it was just for friends. It was just to say, like, I'm taking a little bit of time to hang out with him, and let everybody see what he's, going to his MRI meeting or whatever it is. And other people wanted to see, because he had so many friends. He was such a connector. He was so connected to so many people. He would call people. He had so many well-wishers and loved ones. And so we would put it on YouTube, and people loved it because even if it was only 30 or 40 people, they got to spend a few minutes with Jack.
Again, he's so special in so many ways, willing to share his journey, that he had a friend like you that had the technical skills to be able to capture it and then to be able to put it together in a movie that now thousands, if not millions of people can go ahead and take the lessons that Jack is, shared with us. So not to create a spoiler alert, but the twists and turns within the movie was so real and so heart-wrenching at times. But because there was no script, it wasn't planned. Who would have known that the conversations that Jack was trying to close out as he offboarded his life would evolve like that? To me, it shows people that's the lesson learned, is that life keeps giving lessons until the very end, even when you're in control. And for Jack, he was in control of the day he died.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. He didn't. You asked a question earlier, or made a comment like, he didn't want those last minutes shown. He knew where the line was going to be drawn, and he, obviously in concert with his wife Jennifer, they did establish some level of privacy. You could go too far on these things, but it's extraordinary now. Like the film, just this week, you're catching me. Like just this week, we have launched our national PBS broadcast. So it's an official.
So we're September 2024.
So Jack Has a Plan is now a PBS documentary. It's showing in stations across the country. You can see the times at jackdocumentary.com, getting my pitches in. And it's on Amazon. PBS Documentaries has an Amazon Prime channel, so it's available on Amazon Prime. And what's amazing is I'm starting to get feedback from complete strangers, like just people that are stumbling upon it, or it's the word of mouth is spreading, and they say that they'll never forget Jack. They'll never forget him. So
it's true.
He achieved what he set out to do when he originally asked me to start recording his life, and in the sense that he's not trying to proselytize. He doesn't have a message. He's not saying you should do what he did. This is not an advocacy film for medical aid in dying or for anything. It's a story of his life, and he just wanted to tell a little story. And now it's out there, and it's amazing that people are finding so much meaning in it.
It's so much meaning to it. So let me ask, just because, to bring it back into that pre-planning phase, right? So a lot of what I do is, in conversations we have on death and dying, the digital age, is that how to prepare. Now, Jack was very prepared for whatever reason, maybe because he had that first bout and then it circled back. Now, from the time he got his second diagnosis, right, knowing like, okay, we're in the fourth quarter now, what did he start to put into place? From a legal, financial, physical, the digital aspects, I'll say that, you guys did the film, but those conversations that worked with his family.
He was estranged from his parents. No spoilers there about what happens with that. And, he was astute, and his wife is astute. And so, of course, there are things that are not in the film that I don't even know about, related to maybe estate planning and legal stuff and life insurance and all of that stuff. I mean, he was astute enough to think about that ahead of time and plan that out and prepare. Well, I mean, one of the things that was absolutely key that he did that ended up on the editing room floor is they lived in a beautiful, I don't know, 3-bedroom house overlooking the Pacific Ocean just south of San Francisco. It was a gorgeous place. And they moved to the heart of San Francisco in a small apartment in a high-rise building to be close to her work, to have less driving to do, to downsize, to downsize their life. Yeah, I mean, they lived to a studio. They moved from a sizable place with a yard and everything and a great view to downtown San Francisco in a studio apartment. And it was a way to prepare.
So was Jennifer on board with that? Because again, in consulting with some of my clients who are couples, I find that sometimes one partner wants to dive into it, have those hard conversations, start planning, but you have another one that's really apprehensive. And there's that one scene in the movie where Jennifer's like, he quit his job and didn't even tell me about it. So, where were they in that, pre-planning phase? And was Jennifer as on board that he was planning out this last quarter of his life, or was she still trying to fight?
I mean, to her credit, she might not have been on board. To her credit, even if she didn't want to do that for her life, she knew where he was in his life, and they compromised and they figured out a way to make it work, even if it was not. I mean, he was prescient in the sense that it worked out according to his plan. He kind of got what he wanted. Like, that's so Jack too. Like, without being overbearing, and I mean, he was kind of stubborn in a sense, but without being macho or something, he was resolute. He knew that was the smart thing to do. I mean, he would joke around and say, we have it in some of the outtakes and some of our social media now. Like he said, like, I don't need every Ray Charles record. I don't need every record of all of his famous jazz or R&B artists. He said, I don't need any new underwear. I don't need things anymore. We can downsize. And that's really hard. Like, for someone in the middle of it, like, young, vibrant, beautiful wife that he had, that she, like, we like things, right? And we're still aspiring. And he didn't have a bucket list. I mean, they did do a lot of travel. So you could go down the list, and he said, I'm satisfied. Okay. Like, I think, let's underscore that. He was satisfied. I used to marvel at that. I'm like, you're a lot more satisfied than I am. I always want to do a million things, and how come I didn't get to this or that? He reached a point where he was content and he was satisfied, and that freed him up to not have a lot of suffering in the end.
And don't you believe that that's because of the resolve, because of the diagnosis, right? Some people don't get to that place and space of, I don't need it, I'm good. But if he didn't have and maybe that's the rub there, where people aren't willing to lean into what if you don't have tomorrow, right? Because we're all going to die, right? We're all going to die. So whether we die sudden and unexpected, we die with a terminal diagnosis or condition like Jack, or, like my father-in-law who's sitting in God's waiting room, waiting to be called. Yeah. But to have that plan, Jennifer didn't have a plan, because for her, she's in the prime of her life, even knowing her husband is.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, she'd done a lot of meditation. She's a very talented acupuncturist. Which, by the way, she went into that line of work after his his first bout, right? So that inspired her to help other people heal. And she'd done a lot of workshops and thinking and reading about, like, she rejected the idea of being a caregiver because, that was kind of a she didn't want to be the passive subservient. She's not. She's like total, strong, independent, creative person. So, she also is an amateur thanatologist in a sense. She was very aware. I mean, she would what's it called? It's a Buddhist, the 5 realities or something. Like she would, we're all are gonna one day become old. We are all one day are gonna become sick. We all one day are gonna die. And so she would even, recite and meditate on that concept. He knew he didn't want to do chemo. That's key.
Second round.
First round, he did a little bit of it, and that was enough for him. Like, he knew he did not want to do chemo. He did not want that feeling. And that was beguiling and concerning for a lot of people, because that's supposed to be the way that you fight. It's a battle, so to speak. But
right. Well, they say, you're going to beat this.
Yes.
You're the warrior. Again, personal. Some people need to get versus the opposite, which is, I have a diagnosis. I'm dead tomorrow, or why bother living, or why bother contributing? Because we just don't know. We don't know. Let me ask, did Jack, was the way the ceremony or the celebration of life they had for him and in spreading his ashes, that was he involved with that development?
I think so.
Planning?
Yeah, I think that they knew that where they wanted to do it, it was a spot where, I should know off the top of my head the name of that park, but it was a park overlooking the ocean, the Pacific Ocean in San Francisco, where they could, from that vantage point, they could see their whole life. Basically, you could look to the north and see the different neighborhoods in a distance where they had lived. You could look to the south to see that house in Daly City to the south where they had lived over the. They could before he passed, they went up there and they said, "This is the spot." And
wow.
And in the end, we each got. It's depicted in the movie. We each got we each got a little piece of him. Like, I still have mine. I could grab it off the shelf right behind me, or you could spread it right there. But just a little. It was, to me, that was just a beautiful ceremony, because they. Everyone had just like this little piece of him. It was so egalitarian and community oriented, to each, like, as opposed to just going up and looking at a body, or, having all the ashes in one big urn that is off somewhere where, keep it away from me, and not to let everybody. It was clear. It was like a clear bottle. You could see the little pieces, and a little sticker with his smiling face. It was organic. It was. I mean, I don't want to leave the impression that he wrote a script. That like that it was. Yes, it was thoughtful and considered ahead of time. But a lot of it was just like, the whole notion of how you live, how you die is how you live, and back and forth. I mean, they just made good choices. I mean, they considered it. They had their heart in the right place. It was all about gratitude, about showing love, about connecting with people, about making sure people were comfortable over time. Even if they didn't agree, at least they understood the decisions that he gave them time, And so therefore the decisions kind of just all fell into place. And that's how it worked with the movie. Like, again, that's a beautiful thing. It doesn't happen that often in life, where you kind of get into a flow and you allow things to happen, and they're so much more beautiful than if you had wrangled. Yeah.
You could ever imagine.
Yeah.
I heard death is like that too. The actual, with people who've experienced near-death experiencers, they've actually said that when they've gone to the other side, it's an experience words can't put to it. So to bring that back to this realm and recreate that unfolding so people can remember. And, just to close out this conversation, one piece I found I wanted to just take a moment is for a lot of couples that are going through the loss of one or the other, having that conversation about how do you continue to live your life without me in it, honor the life we've lived together as a couple, but still I bless you in whatever that word is. Where was that? Where were Jack and Jennifer there? Where did their conversation, because she is remarried now and has moved on with her life. Jack passed away what year?
2019. It was 5 years ago at the end of last month.
Right. So he's honored, and yet she's moved on. Was that a conversation they had beforehand? Because I know for a lot of couples, the bereavement part, the grief part is because they haven't had that conversation beforehand. They're so into, especially if there's a diagnosis, they're so into the fight. They're so into, I don't want to talk about my death because then I'm giving up. Jack, obviously, to me is
I think that she was a little bit younger than he was, and he knew that he wanted her to have a whole nother phase of her life after he passed. They met when she was in her early 20s, and they were together 25 years, so, or even longer. And so that was a lot of, I mean, she sacrificed a lot, I mean, that's probably not the right word, sacrifice, but I mean, she had to deal with his illness and his disability for a long time. And so I think he did want to give that to her in a sense. I mean, we can debate how much that figured into his decision to use medical aid in dying, but it didn't matter. Like he loved her so much, and he wanted, he didn't want to be a burden. I mean, he said that openly in the film, like he did not want to be. So, I mean, yes, the answer is it was important to him that he kind of not only give people the gift of this story and share what he went through and just have a good time with people. I mean, that's what he was kind of after is, hey, we can have humor, we can have gratitude, we can have fun. And even in the harshest, most difficult times, and even in the times where we're facing our demise. And in that same spirit, he wanted her to go on afterwards. And I mean, it is difficult now, especially now that we're, these national broadcasts and stuff, to be, she has moved on. I mean, of course, there's still, all kinds of lingering things, I'm sure, and right. Memories, but now the freshness of everything that they went through is now being shared with so many people. That it's surreal, and at the same time, people are finding, like I said before, people are finding so much meaning in it that it's wonderful that he had this idea and then he decided to create this story with me.
And to be so open. Death, Dying in the Digital Age, Bradley, we want to bring lessons learned. So as a friend, as a director, and now, promoting the movie out there as Jack's legacy, what do you want people to take away, not just from the movie, but our conversation today?
I mean, it's pretty simple in the sense that it's a good story. I just want people to meet Jack and see, experience a little bit about what it was like for him and how he dealt with it with such, just such a calmness and a thoughtful and a goofiness. Like, it's okay to laugh. It's okay to have these conversations. It's okay for people to disagree with you about how you approach it if you know what you want, right? So it's the sum total of all those things that get wrapped in a story. And at the same time, it's fine to be confused by it, and it's you can have more than one thought in your head at the same and feeling in your head at the same time. I just want people to watch it and see what they experience, see how they respond.
So, Bradley, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate your time and your gifts.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast, and continued success with everything that with all your work in this field.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. I hope this conversation inspired you to take control and plan for the inevitable to protect yourself and those you leave behind. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at digitallegacypodcast.com. Remember, life is full of surprises. What happens after you die shouldn't be. So keep your passwords safe and your playbook up to date.